1953. A kitchen that smells like Folgers and ironed cotton. Linoleum cool under bare feet. A woman folds a dish towel into thirds, not because it matters, but because that is how it is done. She learned the code the way every woman did, not from a book, from watching. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly what that code demanded and why it was erased from the record. It started with a knock on a new neighbor's door, the etiquette she performed in public, the 20 rules whispered in private, the friendships that enforced them, and the block that never let anyone forget. 4 chapters, 1 code. It starts now. A knock sounds. On the porch of a newly settled tract home, an established neighbor stands waiting. She does not ring the bell twice. She holds a modest offering, perhaps a jar of preserves or a loaf of bread. This is the calling on, a brief, silent initiation to the block. The knock is an invitation and an audit. The visitor is often an informal neighborhood elder carrying local knowledge about school routes, grocery stores, and garbage collection days. But her real cargo is observation. As she steps onto the kitchen linoleum, her eyes register the details. A Pyrex dish drying on the rack, a telephone receiver resting in its cradle. These objects form a silent baseline of order. Belonging on this street is not guaranteed by a mortgage. It is negotiated at the threshold. The visitor's manner matters far more than the material worth of her gift. The newcomer must receive her graciously, accept the practical advice, and prepare to return the gesture to begin the cycle of mutual aid. This code was never uniform. In black urban neighborhoods, a block mother might deliver a hot meal, anchoring the newcomer into church networks. In rural settings, welcome meant a promise of shared labor. Yet on every block, the pause at the screen door remained a learned signal, initiating a lifelong contract of reciprocity. Amy Vanderbilt's 1960 manual formalized this public presentation, prescribing the precise, moderate telephone voice that projected composure. By 1963, Emily Post explicitly instructed women to answer the receiver with a friendly, controlled warmth, sounding receptive but never prying. In 1965, Good Housekeeping reinforced this polish, linking the constant use of formal white gloves to social awareness and hosting competence. Public femininity was treated as an ongoing, visible performance of moral standing. Yet, these printed directives were merely prescriptions, not uniform realities. Across black, working class, rural, and immigrant communities, women adapted, ignored, or rewrote these demands to fit the immediate realities of their streets. For the average housewife, learning this system was rarely about studying a manual. Instead, she felt the code through correction, noticing the slight tightening of an older neighbor's smile or a sudden, heavy silence before she could even name the rule she had broken. She slowly adjusted her posture, modulated her tone, and moved toward awareness. Because while the etiquette book gave a rule a single sentence, the room gave it consequences. An upright spine was the first indicator of self-control. In another woman's living room or on a folding chair at a PTA meeting, a lady never slumped. She sat with her knees together, her ankles crossed, her elbows held slightly away from the armrests. To rest heavily against a chair was to signal a laxity of mind, a failure of vigilance. This spatial discipline extended outdoors. At a July backyard barbecue, amidst the smoke of charcoal and the hum of cicadas, the boundary became mathematical. When speaking to another woman's husband, the code demanded a physical distance of at least 1 arm's length. The surrounding women watched. Long before any husband noticed, the wives on the patio read the angle of a shoulder, the duration of a laugh. A gesture could be entirely innocent, yet the collective eye of the neighborhood could easily misread it. This ambiguity was the code's greatest power. There was no need for a direct accusation, Only a subtle shift in the conversation, a sudden coolness by the salad bowl, or a quiet adjustment of space. These bodily limits varied across different streets, shaped by class, race, and age. But everywhere, physical posture remained the visible baseline. The public body became the shorthand for a much larger, silent law. An older neighbor on the porch does not lecture. She simply tilts her chin, correcting a misplaced gesture with a silent, heavy glance. Through these quiet signs, a newcomer learns that a single mistake never stays with the woman who made it. It travels quickly down the block, whispered over clotheslines and shared fences. These agreements are absent from printed manuals. Instead, they live in the quiet air of the neighborhood, passed down like heirloom recipes. The first rules govern the strict daily discipline of the public body. First, answer the telephone in a soft, controlled tone, keeping the voice low and close to the mouthpiece. To call into the receiver is to show a lack of control. Second, when sitting in another woman's home, keep your elbows entirely off the armrests. An upright, independent spine is the baseline of respect. Third, wear formal gloves when entering a social gathering or serving a formal dinner, maintaining the quiet distinction of the host. Fourth, maintain a physical distance of at least 1 arm's length when speaking with another woman's husband. The boundary must remain clear and visible to anyone watching from a kitchen window. Then, the rules of crisis and celebration demand their own steady rhythm. Fifth, bring a hot casserole to a house of mourning, then return the borrowed dish, thoroughly cleaned, within 48 hours. No material obligations must linger. Sixth, at a baby shower, never say congratulations before the mother-to-be has spoken and opened the social moment. To speak too soon is to presume. On the shared party line, the copper wire belongs to the entire block. Seventh, listen first to ensure the line is quiet. Keep the conversation brief and yield the connection immediately when another household needs the wire. Eighth, return borrowed Pyrex on the designated day with the glass dish and its lid wiped clean. To misplace the lid or to return it with grease in the seams is a quiet declaration of carelessness. If a lid goes missing, the lender will rarely demand it back. Her silence is the actual penalty, a cold weight that lingers on the kitchen counter long after the transaction is over. Ninth, treat news of a neighbor's serious illness as a sacred trust, not a piece of currency to be traded. You do not own the secret just because you were the first to hear it. 10th, host a welcome tea or an afternoon visit within the accepted neighborhood window after a new family unpacks their station wagon. Delaying this introduction speaks of a collective hesitation, a quiet waiting to see if they will fit. 11th, never comment on another woman's garden unless she specifically invites you to look. Her flower bed is her private labor, and uninvited praise can feel like surveillance. 12th, leave the porch swing exactly where it hangs. Moving it to face away from the street or pulling it back to the wall is a visible signal of withdrawal, a sign that the household is closing its doors to the block. 13th, when borrowing a cup of sugar or a handful of flour, never return the measuring cup empty. A small token, a single cookie, a slice of cake, or a fresh lemon must sit in the bottom of the dish, acknowledging the debt before it can become an obligation. 14th, modulate your voice to a restrained, soft tone the moment a husband enters the kitchen. The domestic space belongs to the women during the day, but his arrival resets the room, demanding a quiet deference that preserves the household peace. 15th, mail a written thank you note for any gift or significant favor within 3 days. A spoken word is fleeting, but ink on paper makes the appreciation permanent and official. 16th, quiet the household immediately if a child interrupts a phone call and yield the party line. Domestic noise must never bleed onto the shared wire, disturbing the peace of the block. 17th, avoid political arguments during a church supper or fellowship gathering. Table talk must remain polite and light, protecting the fragile harmony of the parish. 18th, Offer school transportation to a neighbor's child if your station wagon is already headed that way. Shared labor is the daily currency of the street. 19th, never leave a shared casserole or borrowed dish uncovered on the kitchen counter. Exposed food signals a careless home. And 20th, when a neighbor packs her life into a station wagon and moves away, send a handwritten farewell card within a week. This final gesture closes the ledger of reciprocity, a quiet, necessary release from the block's contract. By the time a woman masters these 20 rules, they are no longer instructions to remember. They have become muscle memory, performed almost unconsciously. Yet, this seamless competence leaves no room for failure. A single slip reveals a crack in the armor. On these quiet streets, the same invisible architecture that secures a woman's belonging now demands her absolute loyalty, binding her to the silent network of female friendship. Between 1957 and 1961, the oral histories and advice columns of neighborhood women show that friendship was not a casual sentiment. It was work. When a doctor's letter or medical test results arrived, the code measured intimacy by the clock. The neighbor told first inherited a heavy, immediate responsibility. The confidant did not offer easy words. Whether she received news of an unexpected pregnancy, a husband's lost job, a failing marriage, or a sudden family crisis, she held the secret close to protect the speaker's control over her own news. This strict restraint distinguished a sincere call for help from the status-seeking circulation of gossip. Loyalty meant showing up with hands ready. In suburban clubs, it meant absolute discretion. In working-class streets and black church networks, it meant practical attendance, scrubbing floors, watching babies, or preparing a meal before any verbal sympathy was offered. To hold one's tongue until the woman who owned the news was ready to speak was the ultimate gift of safety on a block where every window had eyes and where a single whispered rumor could unspool a life. In the winter of 1962, Mrs. E. Emma Harper, a member of a Southern Baptist congregation, attended a social gathering that bypassed her church's unwritten expectations. To the elders, enforcing the rules was a duty to protect communal standards. But for Mrs. Harper, the consequence was a series of closing doors. The music director removed her name from the choir roster. The women who once shared her pew stopped sending invitations to fellowship dinners. When she walked past, their conversations faded into heavy silence. This punishment was quiet, gradual, and easily denied. Neighbors simply became too busy to talk. The very women who relied on Mrs. Harper's help now looked away, serving as both keepers and targets of the same unspoken system. In her oral history, Mrs. Harper recalled this shunning as a social death. The unwritten contract of mutual support had shifted, hardening into absolute community pressure. The block was not merely a row of houses. It was a self-regulating cooperative. On these streets, the block elder organized the quiet flow of survival. The newcomer, once scrutinized at her own screen door, now stepped into the ranks of the providers. She baked the extra loaf, held the neighbor's toddler during a doctor's appointment, and kept watch. A woman belonged to the street, and the street belonged to her. This shared ownership made food, child watch, and emergency cash feel protective rather than prying. At church suppers, the seating arrangements silently mapped a woman's standing, an unspoken seating chart of local respect. This safety net wore different faces across America. In suburban tracts, it lived in PTA meetings and bridge clubs. On black urban blocks, church mothers and neighborhood block mothers coordinated hot meals and active care. In rural counties, reciprocity meant shared harvest labor, while immigrant enclaves wrapped their mutual aid in old world recipes and religious traditions. It was a fragile, essential piece. When the cooperative fractured, the penalty was rarely a loud confrontation. Instead, enforcement took the shape of disappearance. It was the silence on the party line, the casserole that never arrived during a family illness, and the driveway wave that slowly declined to a brief nod, then to nothing at all. This unpaid coordination of care and respectability upheld the entire social order, quietly benefiting husbands, churches, and neighborhood associations, while demanding conformity and restricted privacy as the steep price of belonging. While formal etiquette survived in glossy manuals, this practical daily code existed only in oral histories, letters, recipes, and repetitive routines. Institutional archives historically ignored these domestic rituals, choosing to record policy and public events instead. The code left a faint trace because its relational labor was difficult to preserve. None of it was written down, yet all of it was enforced. It was erased from historical memory simply because nobody could figure out how to sell it. Today, the group chat and the neighborhood app have replaced the physical block. We ping, post, and alert with rapid speed, coordinating rides and safety warnings across digital feeds. But these fast channels have different rules. They demand quick responses and polite online tones, yet they lack the heavy, repeated practice of the screen door and the shared porch. Digital exclusion happens with a single click, silent and swift. The modern web coordinates, but it does not build belonging. The old code, the welcome tea, the quiet posture, the 20 silent rules, the locked secrets, and the block duties was a single, interlocking system. It was both deeply protective and highly restrictive. Now, this unspoken architecture survives only in memory. It lives where it always did, in practice, and in the women who remember. Today, we tap on screens instead of knocking on screen doors. In escaping the suffocating conformity of the old block, we also dissolved its life-saving protection. No digital network can replicate the quiet grace of a secret kept or a meal offered in silence. Some architectures cannot be digitized. They must be lived.